Ladies, today I want to speak a truth that is often invisible yet profoundly damaging: the way a narcissistic husband treats the woman he claims to love. Love is supposed to feel safe. It should make you feel seen, supported, and cherished. But in the presence of a narcissistic husband, love becomes a weapon, a cage, a tool for control. At first, he may appear perfect, devoted, attentive, overwhelming in his affection. This stage, often called love bombing, feels like a dream. She is showered with compliments, gifts, and promises, but the magic is a mirage. Behind it lies a careful plan to create dependence and trust that he can later exploit. At the beginning of the relationship, a narcissistic husband often seems like a dream come true. He showers his wife with attention, compliments, gifts, and grand romantic gestures that make her feel extraordinary. Every word, every touch, every act feels carefully designed to make her believe she has found a once-in-a-lifetime love. He tells her she is the most beautiful, most intelligent, most deserving woman in the world. He listens intently, at least at first, making her feel deeply understood and cherished. This stage is called love bombing, and it is far more than mere romance. It is a strategic tool. The narcissist is not just showing affection, he is establishing trust, dependency, and admiration. By making her feel uniquely special, he creates a psychological bond that is difficult to break later. She begins to believe that this love is unconditional, that she is safe, and that she has finally found someone who truly sees her. The danger lies in the fact that this love is conditional and performative. Every compliment, every gift, every tender gesture has an invisible string attached. She is being trained to associate his affection with compliance, obedience, and admiration of him in return. The woman feels exhilarated, intoxicated by the intensity of the love, unaware that it is a carefully orchestrated trap. Over time, this idealization becomes the lens through which she judges the entire relationship. She may overlook early red flags because the memory of that perfect attention lingers. When the mask begins to slip, the contrast feels confusing and devastating. How could the same man who once adored her so intensely now criticize, dismiss, or manipulate her? Understanding this stage is crucial. Recognizing that love bombing is not true love, but a calculated strategy, allows the woman to maintain her emotional boundaries and protect her self-worth before deeper harm occurs. The ideal love is a mirage, intense, dazzling, and ultimately a tool to establish control. Once the initial stage of idealization fades, the narcissistic husband's true patterns begin to emerge. Emotional manipulation becomes the core of the relationship, often so subtle that the woman doesn't immediately recognize it. Words are twisted, events are reframed, and her feelings are minimized or dismissed. Over time, she begins to doubt herself, her memory, and even her own instincts. Every disagreement may be reframed as her fault. A simple misunderstanding can become evidence of her inadequacy or emotional instability. He might tell her she is too sensitive, too demanding, or overreacting, making her question whether her feelings are valid. This constant erosion of trust in her own perception leaves her vulnerable and more dependent on his version of reality. The manipulation is often gradual and insidious. It may start with small comments, casual criticisms disguised as jokes, seemingly helpful advice, or questioning her decisions. Over time, these subtle tactics accumulate, creating an environment where she feels anxious, guilty, and perpetually wrong. Emotional manipulation is not just a bomb. Out control. It is about creating a cycle of self-doubt that reinforces his power in the relationship. Through this manipulation, he ensures that she prioritizes his emotional state over her own. Gaslighting is one of the most insidious ways a narcissistic husband controls the woman he claims to love. It's a tactic that attacks her perception of reality, making her question her memory, feelings, and even her sanity. What she once trusted as truth becomes a source of doubt because he systematically rewrites events, denies promises, and dismisses her emotions as overreactions or imaginations. In the early stages, it may appear subtle. He might say, "That never happened," or "You're remembering it wrong." But over time, these small denials pile up, creating a world in which she increasingly relies on his version of reality. She starts to question herself. Am I imagining things? Was I really too sensitive? Did I make a mistake? The psychological impact is devastating because it undermines the very foundation of self-trust. Gaslighting is not just about lying, it's about eroding confidence and autonomy. He often mixes truth with distortion, making her doubt the clarity of her own judgment. Even when evidence exists, he may twist it or minimize its significance. The effect is a constant state of confusion, self-blame, and anxiety. The woman begins to walk on eggshells, fearing that expressing her feelings or asserting her perspective will trigger further denial, criticism, or emotional withdrawal. This manipulation is especially cruel because it masquerades as care or rational discussion. He may claim he's helping her see things clearly or protecting her from overreacting. But in reality, he is establishing control. Every interaction reinforces the idea that she cannot trust herself without his guidance, leaving her dependent, uncertain, and isolated. The heartbreaking truth is that gaslighting makes love feel unsafe. What should be a source of comfort becomes a source of constant doubt and fear. Recognizing gaslighting is a turning point. It is the first step toward reclaiming self-trust, understanding that her feelings and memories are valid, and learning that no one has the right to distort her reality under the guise of love. A narcissistic husband often understands that love can be weaponized most effectively when his partner is alone. Isolation is a deliberate tactic designed to remove the woman from her sources of strength, comfort, and perspective, her friends, family, and even colleagues. By cutting off these connections, he ensures she becomes increasingly dependent on him for emotional validation, guidance, and even a sense of reality. Isolation often begins subtly. He may complain that her friends are too negative, that her family doesn't understand their relationship, or that people are against them. Over time, these comments erode her confidence in others' intentions. Invitations from friends may be questioned or criticized, phone calls monitored or interrupted, and gatherings discouraged with guilt-inducing remarks like, "If you really loved me, you wouldn't leave me for them." The effect is gradual but profound. Without external support, her emotional world shrinks. She begins to rely solely on him for approval and comfort. Any self-doubt, fear, or insecurity is amplified because there is no counterbalance, no trusted voice to reassure her, no safe space to process her feelings. This creates a feedback loop. The more isolated she becomes, the more control he exerts. Isolation also serves another purpose. It protects his public persona. While he may charm and impress outsiders in private, he controls and criticizes. By keeping the woman cut off, he ensures that others remain unaware of the emotional toll she experiences daily. She begins to question her own perceptions while he maintains the appearance of a loving, devoted husband to the outside world. The heartbreak of this isolation is, too, the woman may not even realize how trapped she has become. She may feel guilty for wanting to reach out or fearful of angering him, thinking she is at fault for the growing distance from her suppo. In a healthy relationship, love is not a reward. It is a constant, unwavering support that nurtures and sustains. But with a narcissistic husband, affection is rarely unconditional. His love is a tool, given selectively based on whether the woman meets his expectations, complies with his wishes, or maintains his carefully constructed image of her. She quickly learns that praise, attention, or intimacy are not freely offered, they are earned. Conditional affection creates a relentless cycle of anxiety and self-monitoring. She begins to constantly ask herself, have I done enough to deserve his approval? Did I say the right thing? Did I meet his expectations? The fear of withdrawal of love or attention becomes a controlling force. Even minor disagreements or independent choices can trigger coldness, silence, or subtle punishments, reinforcing the idea that she must always walk on eggshells to maintain his approval. This type of love is deeply confusing. Moments of warmth feel genuine, leading her to cling to the hope that if she tries harder, she can restore the initial perfect love. Yet, no matter how much she adapts, the affection remains unstable, fleeting, and dependent on his moods or agenda. It becomes a game she can never fully win. The danger of conditional affection is that it teaches her to tie her self-worth to his approval. She begins to measure her value not by her own standards, goals, or accomplishments, but by whether she is enough for him. This erodes her autonomy, making it harder to set boundaries or assert her needs without guilt or fear of reprisal. Recognizing this pattern is crucial. True love does not fluctuate based on performance, obedience, or perfection. It uplifts, nurtures, and remains steadfast even in moments of disagreement. Conditional affection, on the other hand, is a mechanism of control disguised as love, keeping the woman kept in a cycle of striving, self-doubt, and emotional dependence. The first step toward liberation is understanding that she deserves consistent, unconditional love, love that empowers rather than punishes, that celebrates rather than controls, and that nurtures rather than isolates. She is not responsible for earning the affection she deserves. It is her right simply because she is worthy. One of the most confusing and painful aspects of living with a narcissistic husband is the stark contrast between how he behaves in public versus in private. To the outside world, he may appear charming, generous, attentive, and even the ideal partner. Friends, family, and colleagues may see a man who is loving and devoted, a man any woman would envy. But behind closed doors, the reality is entirely different. In private, he may be controlling, critical, dismissive, or emotionally abusive. The woman quickly learns that her safety and emotional well-being depend on her ability to navigate his moods, meet impossible expectations, and avoid triggering criticism. The public facade protects him from accountability while intensifying her isolation, as she fears revealing her struggles will result in disbelief, judgment, or further manipulation. This duality creates profound confusion. She may ask herself, is it me? Am I imagining things? How can he treat me this way if everyone else thinks he's perfect? The constant dissonance between his public charm and private cruelty erodes her confidence, makes her second-guess her perceptions, and deepens her emotional entrapment. The public versus private persona is not accidental, it is a deliberate strategy. By maintaining a flawless image externally, he shields himself from consequences while controlling the narrative of their relationship. She may feel powerless, trapped between a man who appears adored by the world and a partner who tears her down behind closed doors. Understanding this pattern is essential for her liberation. True love is consistent and transparent. It does not rely on secrecy or deception to maintain power. Rakesh, a narcissistic husband, often works quietly but relentlessly to undermine the woman's self-worth. This is not always overt criticism. It can be subtle, disguised as jokes, advice, or concern. Her achievements, appearance, decisions, and even her emotions may be belittled or ignored. Over time, these constant micro-assaults chip away at her confidence, leaving her vulnerable, dependent, and questioning her own value. She may hear comments like, "Are you sure you can handle that?" or, "You look tired, maybe you shouldn't try that." What seems small at first compounds over months and years. The woman begins to internalize the narrative that she is inadequate, incapable, or unworthy of love. Even her successes are often minimized or dismissed, making her feel she can never truly meet expectations, no matter how hard she tries. Undermining self-worth serves a clear purpose. It strengthens his control. A woman who doubts herself is easier to manipulate, easier to guilt, and easier to keep dependent. She begins to measure her value through his approval rather than her own intrinsic worth, constantly seeking validation while rarely receiving genuine support. This erosion of self-esteem often leads to a dangerous cycle. She may overcompensate, striving harder to please him, only to face further criticism or rejection. Her identity slowly becomes defined by his standards rather than her own, leaving her disconnected from her passions, her voice, and her sense of self. The heartbreaking truth is that the man who claims to love her is systematically teaching her to believe she is not enough. Recognizing this manipulation is crucial. She must understand that her worth is inherent, that no one has the right to diminish her, and that genuine love nurtures, uplifts, and affirms rather than controls and erodes. Reclaiming self-worth is a journey. It begins with awareness, self-codes, compassion, and the courage to set boundaries. It is about trusting herself, celebrating her strengths, and realizing that she is deserving of love that honors her value rather than diminishes it. One of the most exhausting and damaging behaviors of a narcissistic husband is his relentless avoidance of responsibility. In his world, he is rarely, if ever, at fault. Instead, every problem, every conflict, and every moment of tension is reframed as the woman's fault. This is called blame shifting, and it is a powerful tool for maintaining control. Even when he clearly makes a mistake or behaves hurtfully, he will twist the narrative to make her feel responsible. She might hear statements like, "If you hadn't done that, I wouldn't have reacted this way," or "You made me feel this way. It's your fault." Over time, she internalizes this message, questioning her own actions and feeling constant guilt. She begins to apologize for things she didn't do and take responsibility for emotions she didn't create. This behavior serves multiple purposes. First, it protects him from accountability, allowing him to maintain the illusion of perfection both in private and public. Second, it keeps her trapped in a cycle of self-doubt and overcompensation. The more she apologizes, explains, or tries to make amends, the more he reinforces the pattern of control. She learns to anticipate his reactions, constantly adjusting her behavior to avoid blame and conflict, rather than feeling safe to be herself. Blame shifting is particularly cruel because it erodes trust in her own judgment. She begins to wonder if she is indeed the source of every problem in the marriage. Her sense of self and autonomy is slowly dismantled as she constantly searches for ways to fix the relationship or appease him. Recognizing blame shifting is a crucial step toward reclaiming power. Understanding that the responsibility for his actions, words, and emotions lies with him and not her allows her to break free from the cycle of guilt and self-blame. True love involves accountability, empathy, and mutual living with a narcissistic husband is a journey through confusion, fear, and heartbreak. The woman who loves deeply finds herself trapped in a cycle of idealization, manipulation, isolation, conditional affection, and relentless criticism. Every part of her, her confidence, her voice, her autonomy, is challenged, questioned, and diminished. Yet, the most heartbreaking truth is that this treatment is disguised as love, leaving her to wonder if she is imagining the pain or if she is simply not enough. But awareness is power. Recognizing these patterns, the love bombing, the gaslighting, the blame, and the isolation, is the first step toward reclaiming herself. Her worth is not defined by his control, nor is her value diminished by his cruelty. She deserves love that uplifts, respect that honors, and freedom that empowers. True love does not manipulate, punish, or isolate. True love celebrates and supports. To every woman trapped in this cycle, your feelings are valid, your instincts are true, your strength is real. You do not have to endure manipulation to be loved. Liberation begins with seeing clearly, trusting yourself, and taking the courageous steps to honor your own worth. You are worthy of love that never diminishes you, and it is possible to reclaim your life, your voice, and your joy. When you decide to step away from a narcissist, the world around you may feel lighter, freer, and more authentic. But what happens in the mind of someone who has thrived on control, validation, and manipulation? Understanding this is not about revenge or curiosity. It's about reclaiming your own power and noticing the patterns that once held you captive. The first thing you'll notice is a deep confusion. The narrative they relied on, the story that positioned them at the center, and you as the supporting character is gone. Without someone to mirror their ego, their carefully constructed reality begins to crumble. Suddenly, the world doesn't revolve around them, and the certainty they once felt evaporates. A narcissist's world is a delicate illusion. Every thought, every word, every interaction has been meticulously crafted to maintain an image of control, superiority, and perfection. This reality isn't built on truth or mutual respect. It's built on manipulation, dependence, and the reflection of others. You are a crucial part of that structure. Your reactions, your compliance, your validation, they acted as bricks in the walls of their self-made kingdom. The moment you leave, that foundation begins to crumble. The narrative they relied on, the story that cast them as the hero, the victim, or the center of every situation, is shattered. Without your presence to affirm their constructed identity, their mind begins to spiral. They no longer have the constant reassurance that everything is under their control. Every certainty they took for granted becomes questionable. Every memory, every conversation, and every truth they held starts to feel unstable. This collapse is not instantaneous or dramatic. It's subtle, creeping in like shadows over a house of cards. They begin to doubt their judgment, question their assumptions, and second-guess their own sense of reality. Small cracks appear in their carefully painted facade, and those cracks quickly widen under the weight of your absence. The once solid world that seemed so permanent is now fragile and unstable, and for the first time, they must confront the frightening reality that they do not and perhaps cannot control everything. In essence, the collapse of their constructed reality is a reckoning. It's a silent acknowledgement that their power was never inherent. It was borrowed from your attention, your energy, and your presence. And when that supply is gone, the carefully orchestrated illusion unravels, leaving them exposed, unbalanced, and profoundly unsettled. Once you're gone, the narcissist's mind becomes a relentless loop of what ifs and why nots. They replay every interaction, every argument, every moment in painstaking detail, searching for answers, explanations, or mistakes they can fix. Their mind refuses to rest because it has been trained to control and manipulate every situation. And now the one situation they cannot control, your absence, torments them endlessly. They dissect conversations in their memory, examining your words, your tone, your expressions, and the smallest gestures, as if somewhere in that replay lies a secret key that could reverse reality. Every no you ever said, every boundary you ever set, every moment you stood firm becomes fuel for obsessive thought. They analyze it from every angle, creating elaborate mental narratives to rationalize your departure or to shift blame away from themselves. But the truth is, there is no definitive answer, and their mind cannot accept it. They crave certainty, but your absence has introduced chaos. Without your presence to mirror them, validate them, or comply with their expectations, they are left with a gnawing emptiness and confusion. Every scenario they imagine for reconciliation, manipulation, or control falls apart before it even begins. The harder they chase, the more they spiral, trapped in a cycle of their own making. This endless mental replay isn't productive, it's destructive, it eats all. Once you're gone, frustration becomes a permanent resident in the narcissist's mind. They are no longer in control, and control has always been their lifeline, the invisible thread that kept their world orderly, predictable, and safe. Now that thread is severed, and every attempt to regain it feels futile. Small irritations become mountains, minor setbacks feel catastrophic, and the absence of your influence magnifies every perceived flaw in their environment. This frustration is not only about losing power, it's about losing certainty. They are used to bending situations, emotions, and people to fit their narrative. Without you, the world refuses to conform. Every unanticipated event, every interaction they cannot manipulate, every boundary they cannot cross becomes a source of irritation and mental unrest. They replay your absence, wishing they could rewrite history, and each imagined scenario that fails only deepens the gnawing frustration. The emotional energy that once flowed from their manipulation of you now turns inward, twisting into restlessness, resentment, and unease. They may attempt to distract themselves by criticizing others, seeking new validation, or creating drama, but these efforts are temporary and hollow. The frustration is like a low-burning fire that never extinguishes, constantly reminding them of their loss and their impotence. This constant agitation is exhausting, yet they cannot stop it. They are trapped in the discomfort of their own mind, unable to find peace, unable to admit vulnerability, and unable to reclaim the certainty they once took for granted. Their frustration becomes both a punishment and a mirror, reflecting the fragility of a life built entirely on external control and the absence of authentic self-awareness. In this way, frustration is more than an emotion. It is a symptom of their unraveling. While they wrestle with this relentless inner turmoil, you are free to breathe, to heal, and to move forward without the weight of their control. The contrast is striking. While they are imprisoned by obsession and unease, you live in liberation and clarity. A narcissist thrives on what psychologists call emotional supply, the steady flow of attention, admiration, and compliance from others. This supply is the air they breathe, the fuel that powers their identity and sustains their sense of importance. You were once a primary source of this supply, a constant mirror reflecting their desires and validating their self-worth. The moment you leave, that supply vanishes, leaving a vacuum that cannot be filled easily, if at all. Isolation sets in almost immediately, though it doesn't resemble the kind of solitude that fosters growth or introspection. Instead, it is a restless, anxious, and gnawing emptiness. They may attempt to fill it with distractions, relationships, or manipulations, but nothing can replace the unique validation that was once yours. Every call unanswered, every message ignored, every boundary enforced becomes a reminder of what they have permanently lost. The absence of emotional supply also exposes a deeper truth they have long avoided. Beneath their grandiose facade and confident exterior, there is a fragile, dependent self. Without constant affirmation, their identity begins to feel unstable. Every insecurity, every shadow of doubt, every hidden fear rises to the surface. Isolation magnifies these internal cracks, and they find themselves trapped in a silent struggle with a self they never truly knew or nurtured. Moreover, isolation creates desperation. They may reach out, attempt to provoke, or engineer scenarios to regain what was lost, but the more they fail, the deeper their sense of solitude becomes. This is not the quiet, reflective loneliness that encourages self-growth. Outh, it is a torment born from the sudden collapse of their control, a mental space where anxiety, regret, and obsession coexist. And yet, while they are confined within this prison of their own making, once you're gone, anger becomes one of the most visible and intense emotions a narcissist experiences. But it's important to understand that this anger is rarely about you directly. It's not fueled by genuine grievance or authentic hurt. Instead, it is a reflection of loss, the loss of control, certainty, and the constant validation they once took for granted. The world no longer bends to their desires, and in that resistance, they feel powerless, threatened, and deeply unsettled. Projection often accompanies this anger. Instead of confronting their own insecurities, failures, or vulnerability, they cast blame outward. You may find that they twist the narrative, suggesting that you were the problem all along, that you abandoned them, or that your choices were selfish. This is not an attempt at reconciliation. It is a defense mechanism, a way to avoid facing the uncomfortable truth that their power over you is gone. Their projections serve as both a shield and a distraction from the gnawing emptiness inside. The anger itself is relentless and consuming. They may lash out in subtle ways through criticism, gossip, manipulation of mutual acquaintances, or even social media displays designed to provoke or unsettle. Every act is an attempt to reclaim what they have lost, but it only deepens the emotional dissonance within. Behind the aggression, there is frustration, confusion, and a quiet despair. They recognize, often unconsciously, that nothing they do can bring back what was taken from their control. This phase is also emotionally exhausting for them. Anger and projection require energy, but unlike the days when they had you to manipulate, now that energy is spent in vain. They are trapped in a loop of rage and defensiveness, bouncing between imagined grievances and the harsh reality of their absence. They feel powerful only in fantasy. In reality, they are disarmed, poached, worthless, and increasingly desperate. For you, witnessing this unraveling can be sobering, but it is also empowering. Their anger and projection are not reflections of your failure, but mirrors of their fragility. While they are consumed by attempts to distort reality, you are free to exist authentically, to set boundaries, and to live without the weight of their emotional turbulence. Ultimately, anger and projection are symptoms of a mind struggling to adapt to the absence of control. They cannot manipulate your presence, they cannot rewrite the past, and they cannot feed the ego that once thrived on your attention. In their fury and misdirection, they reveal the stark contrast between their dependence and your liberation. A narcissist's identity is often like a house of mirrors, carefully constructed, reflective, and dependent on the gaze of others. They have spent years building a persona that hides vulnerability, masks insecurity, and projects strength. This self is not rooted in authenticity. It is built on admiration, compliance, and the attention of those around them. You are a central part of this structure, consistently reflecting back what they needed to see in themselves. The moment you leave, that reflection disappears, and the cracks begin to show. Without your presence, the carefully curated identity they relied on starts to unravel. Every compliment, every act of obedience, every interaction that once validated their ego is gone. In its place, uncertainty creeps in. They begin to confront parts of themselves they have long ignored, their insecurities, their shame, and their unresolved emotions. These are feelings they rarely allowed themselves to acknowledge because doing so would expose weakness. Now, exposure is inevitable. This erosion is subtle but relentless. They may feel hollow, disoriented, or disconnected from who they thought they were. Every decision they make feels heavier, every social interaction feels riskier, and the sense of omnipotence they once carried so effortlessly begins to fade. They may try to rebuild themselves by Once you're gone, the narcissist's mind becomes a relentless battlefield. For years, they have relied on you and others as a source of energy, an emotional supply that fueled their sense of power, control, and self-importance. Every interaction was calculated, every conversation a means to maintain dominance or affirmation. Without that supply, the energy that once came effortlessly now disappears, leaving them to generate it from within, a skill they rarely possess. This absence triggers profound mental exhaustion. Their mind races constantly, cycling through strategies, what ifs, and imagined scenarios. They replay past interactions, analyze every detail, and obsess over ways to regain lost control, but each effort only emphasizes the futility of their situation. Unlike you, who can step back, breathe, and heal, their cognitive and emotional resources are stretched thin, depleted by anxiety, frustration, and relentless mental rumination. The exhaustion is not just about mental effort, it's about emotional labor that goes nowhere. They attempt to manage feelings they cannot fully understand, control circumstances they cannot change, and manipulate outcomes that are permanently out of reach. Each thought, each plan, each projection is an effort to restore the world they once dominated, and yet each attempt ends in failure. The more they try, the more drained they become, trapped in a cycle of endless, unproductive energy expenditure. This mental fatigue also amplifies their internal instability. Decisions feel heavier, reactions become sharper, and emotional regulation grows increasingly difficult. Without the steady stream of external validation that once compensated for inner emptiness, even small triggers can provoke disproportionate anxiety, irritability, or anger. Their mind, once seemingly confident and unshakable, now teeters on the edge of exhaustion and disorientation. Meanwhile, this exhaustion becomes invisible to those who once surrounded them. They may appear composed, even charming on the surface, but internally their cognitive and emotional systems are taxed beyond repair. Every failed attempt to regain what they lost deepens their fatigue, reinforcing the spiral of frustration, anger, and despair. In contrast, your absence highlights the liberation you now enjoy. While they are trapped in the exhausting loop of thought and control, you are free to live authentically, to nurture your energy, and to experience peace without manipulation or obligation. Their mental exhaustion is a mirror of their dependence on others for survival, a stark reminder of what happens when a life is built on control rather than self-awareness. Ultimately, the mental exhaustion of a narcissist is both a consequence of their own design and a reflection of the freedom you now embody. Where their energy is trapped in futility, yours flows freely toward growth, healing, and authentic living. After you're gone, a narcissist enters a state of quiet desperation, a subtle, pervasive unrest that is both internal and inescapable. This is not the loud, explosive anger they may occasionally display. It's a slow, simmering tension that gnaws at the edges of their consciousness. It emerges because the world no longer conforms to their desires, and the one person who once ensured their sense of control and importance is permanently absent. In this quiet desperation, they experience a profound sense of loss that cannot be alleviated by distractions, manipulation, or superficial validation. They are forced to confront the reality that their power, which was never truly theirs, has dissipated. Every memory of your presence becomes both a longing and a reminder of what they can never reclaim. Every unfulfilled desire and every failed attempt at role compounds the emptiness they now feel. This state also exposes the fragility of their constructed self. Beneath the bravado and grandiosity lies a vulnerability they have long avoided facing. Now, Ladies, we need to talk about something that is both simple and deeply transformative: how we communicate with men. The way we speak, listen, and express ourselves can make the difference between surface level attraction and deep, lasting connection. Confidence is one of the most attractive qualities in a woman, but it's often misunderstood. True confidence isn't about being the loudest in the room, showing off achievements, or proving your worth to others. It's about an inner knowing, a quiet, unshakable belief in yourself. When a high-value woman speaks to a man, her confidence comes from a place of self-respect and self-acceptance, not from a need for validation. One of the biggest misconceptions is that confidence and arrogance are the same thing, but they couldn't be more different. Arrogance is loud, confidence is steady. Arrogance seeks to dominate, confidence seeks to connect. An arrogant woman might belittle a man to elevate herself, while a confident woman makes a man feel comfortable and inspired simply by being herself. A high-value woman doesn't feel the need to prove herself in conversation. She doesn't exaggerate her accomplishments, nor does she seek approval by trying to impress. Instead, she is secure in who she is, which allows her to engage in meaningful, effortless conversations. Men love this energy because it's refreshing. In a world where many people try to be something they're not, a woman who is simply comfortable in her own skin is incredibly attractive. Confidence also means being comfortable with silence. A woman who is truly confident doesn't rush to fill every moment with words just to avoid awkwardness. She's at ease with pauses in conversation because she trusts that connection isn't built on constant talking, it's built on presence. When she speaks, she does so with intention. Her words carry weight because she chooses them carefully, and her energy commands respect without demanding it. Furthermore, confidence isn't just about how a woman speaks, it's also about how she carries herself. A high-value woman maintains strong eye contact, uses open body language, and smiles with genuine warmth. She doesn't fidget nervously or shrink herself to take up less space. Instead, she moves with grace and certainty, making it clear that she belongs wherever she chooses to be. Another key aspect of confidence is the ability to handle rejection gracefully. A confident woman understands that not every man will be the right fit for her, and that's perfectly okay. She doesn't chase, beg, or try to force a connection that isn't meant to be. Instead, she trusts that the right person will recognize her value and that she never has to convince anyone to love or respect her. This self-assurance is incredibly appealing to men because it signals emotional maturity and self-worth. For a long time, society has told women that to be strong, they must be invulnerable, that emotions are a weakness, that needing support makes you less independent, and that showing your true feelings makes you too much. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Real strength isn't about hiding your emotions or pretending you don't care. It's about having the courage to be open, to share who you truly are, and to risk being seen. Vulnerability is not weakness. It's one of the most powerful ways to create deep, meaningful connections with men. Think about the people you admire most, the ones you feel deeply connected to. Are they the ones who never show emotion, who never admit fear, who never express their struggles? Or are they the ones who allow you to see their humanity? The truth is, people are drawn to those who are real, and men are no different. A high-value woman understands that showing vulnerability doesn't make her less desirable, it makes her irresistible. Vulnerability creates trust and connection. Men, just like women, crave deep emotional bonds, even if they don't always know how to express it. When a woman is willing to be open and share her real thoughts and feelings, she creates a space where a man feels safe to do the same. That's how trust is built. Not by playing it cool, not by putting up walls, but by being authentic. For example, imagine two different conversations. One woman says, whatever, it doesn't matter to me, when something is clearly bothering her. Another woman says, I feel a little hurt because I was hoping you'd remember our plans. Which one is more powerful? The second. Not only is she expressing her emotions honestly, but she's also inviting a real conversation instead of shutting the other person out. When men see this kind of openness, they feel safe, respected, and inspired to meet her at the same level. Vulnerability shows confidence, not neediness. A common misconception is that being vulnerable makes a woman look needy or desperate, but the opposite is true. A woman who can openly say, I like you, without fear of rejection, is demonstrating incredible confidence. She's not seeking approval, she's simply being honest. That kind of self-assurance is rare, and men find it incredibly attractive. In contrast, someone who hides their feelings out of fear of looking too emotional may end up coming across as distant or even disinterested. The irony is that people try to avoid vulnerability because they don't want to be rejected, but in reality, it's authenticity that makes someone truly magnetic. Men fall in love with the real you, not a perfect image. Many women feel pressure to be perfect when dating, to always say the right thing, never show weakness, and avoid appearing emotional. But perfection isn't relatable. It creates distance rather than intimacy. A high-value woman understands that real connection happens when she shares her joys and her struggles. When she says, I had a tough day, instead of pretending everything is fine. When she admits, that hurt my feelings, instead of brushing it off. When she allows herself to be seen as a real person rather than a flawless image. Men don't fall in love with a mask. They fall in love with a woman's depth, her layers, her heart. And when a woman is strong enough to be vulnerable, she gives a man permission to do the same. She creates a space where he feels safe, seen, and accepted, and that's when real love begins. Vulnerability with boundaries, of course, being vulnerable doesn't mean oversharing or opening up to just anyone. A high-value woman doesn't spill her heart out to someone who hasn't earned her trust. She knows that vulnerability is a gift. It's something she shares gradually with those who show they are worthy of it. This means she doesn't force deep conversations with someone who isn't emotionally available. She doesn't share her entire life story on the first date just to seek validation. She chooses to be open with the right people, those who respect and appreciate her authenticity. The power of saying what you really feel. Many women hold back their emotions out of fear of rejection, fear of being misunderstood, fear of being seen as too much. But what if you flip that mindset? What if, instead of fearing vulnerability, you embraced it as a strength? Imagine telling a man, I really enjoy spending time with you, instead of playing hard to get. Imagine saying, that really hurt me, instead of pretending it didn't matter. Imagine saying, I want something real, instead of acting indifferent about what you truly want. This kind of honesty is powerful. It shows that you respect yourself enough to speak your truth. It also shows that you trust the person you're talking to enough to let them see the real you. And here's the secret. The right man will love that about you. He won't run away from your vulnerability. He'll lean in because he'll see that you're someone special. He'll lean someone real, someone worth knowing deeply. Respect and boundaries are two of the most powerful tools a woman can use in her interactions with men. They determine how she is treated, how deeply she is valued, and how much space she holds in a man's mind and heart. A high-value woman understands that the way she respects herself teaches others how to respect her. She sets boundaries not to push people away, but to ensure she is only surrounded by those who truly appreciate and honor her presence. Many women struggle with this because they fear that setting boundaries will make them appear difficult, or high maintenance. But the truth is, boundaries don't push the right men away, they filter out the wrong ones. So let's break this down. What does respect look like in communication? Respect is a two-way street. If you want to be respected in your interactions with men, you must first respect yourself and then show respect to others. For a high-value woman, respect in communication means speaking with grace and clarity, not aggression or desperation, holding herself to a high standard without belittling others, listening actively and expecting the same in return, refusing to tolerate dismissiveness, manipulation, or disrespect. When she speaks to a man, she does so with calm confidence. She doesn't raise her voice, beg for attention, or force anyone to see her worth. She knows she deserves respect, and that self-assurance naturally earns the respect of others. For example, let's say she's in a conversation where a man keeps interrupting her or dismissing her feelings. Instead of laughing it off or letting it slide, she says, "Oh, it's fine, never mind. I wasn't finished speaking. I'd really like to be heard." I search respect without hostility. Men admire women who respect themselves enough to communicate their thoughts without apology. The power of setting boundaries. A boundary is simply a line that defines what you will and will not accept in your relationships. It's not about control, it's about self-respect. Many women believe that being agreeable and accommodating will make them more desirable. But in reality, men are far more drawn to a woman who has standards. A high-value woman knows boundaries don't make her hard to love, they make her worthy of deep love. A man who truly values her will respect her boundaries, not challenge them. She doesn't have to be rude or defensive, just clear and consistent. Think of it this way. Imagine a queen in her palace. She welcomes guests warmly, but she doesn't allow just anyone to walk in and behave however they please. She has rules, standards, and expectations. And people admire her for it. A high-value woman treats her life and her heart the same way. She invites love in, but she doesn't tolerate disrespect. Examples of healthy boundaries with men: 1, the boundary of time. She doesn't drop everything the second a man calls. If he texts late at night asking to meet up, she might respond with, "I'd love to see you, but I make plans ahead of time. Let's plan something for later this week." This shows that she values her own time and won't allow herself to be a last-minute option. 2, the boundary of emotional energy. She doesn't overextend herself for a man who isn't meeting her halfway. If she notices she's always the one initiating conversations or making plans, she steps back. She lets him show his level of investment. 3, the boundary of respectful communication. She won't tolerate a man speaking to her in a dismissive or condescending way. If he does, she calmly but firmly states, "I don't allow people to speak to me that way. If we're going to continue this conversation, I need respect." By setting this boundary, she shows that she will not engage in unhealthy dynamics. 4, the boundary of physical and emotional space. If a man tries to rush physical intimacy or push emotional conversations before she's ready, she responds with, "I appreciate that you're interested, but I move at my own pace." If this connection is real, there's no rush. A man who truly values her will respect this without hesitation. Why men are drawn to women who set boundaries. Some women worry that setting boundaries will scare men away. The reality? It does, but only the wrong ones. The men who are looking for something casual, easy, or one-sided will often be put off by a woman who knows her worth. And that's a good thing. But the right kind of man, the one who is emotionally mature and ready for something real, he will admire and respect a woman who knows her standards. He will see her as a woman of substance, someone worth pursuing, respecting, and cherishing. Men are naturally drawn to challenge, not in the sense of playing games, but in the sense of earning something valuable. A woman with clear boundaries signals value, and men instinctively recognize that. Respecting yourself first. At the heart of it all, respect and boundaries start with how you treat yourself. If you don't respect your own time, how can you expect a man to? If you don't speak up when you feel uncomfortable, how can you expect a man to know your limits? If you accept less than you deserve, how can you expect a man to give you more? A high-value woman leads by example. She treats herself with kindness, care, and self-respect. And in doing so, she teaches others to treat her the same way. She is not afraid to lose a man who doesn't meet her standards because she knows her worth isn't defined by anyone else. She believes deeply that the right man will rise to meet her, not expect her to lower herself. One of the most powerful yet underrated ways a high-value woman connects with men is by choosing curiosity over criticism. Too often, relationships and conversations break down because people jump to judgment instead of understanding. Instead of seeking to learn, they assume. Instead of asking, they accuse. Instead of being open-minded, they become defensive. A high-value woman understands that how she communicates shapes the way men respond to her. She recognizes that criticism often leads to conflict, while curiosity leads to connection. And when she masters this approach, she creates an environment where men feel comfortable, respected, and drawn to her energy. So let's break this down. Why criticism pushes men away? Criticism is one of the fastest ways to create emotional distance. No one enjoys feeling judged, misunderstood, or attacked, especially men. Men often hear criticism as a failure to measure up. Even if the intent is to help, it can come across as blame or disapproval. This triggers defensiveness, making them shut down, withdraw, or even push back with frustration. For example, imagine a woman says, "You never listen to me. You're so lazy, you never help around the house. Why do you always act like that?" Even if she's frustrated, these statements feel attacking rather than constructive. Instead of opening a conversation, they shut it down. The man hears, "She doesn't appreciate what I do. I'm not good enough for her. No matter what I do, I'll never get it right." The result, he pulls away emotionally, avoids confrontation, or stops trying altogether. A high-value woman, however, understands that a shift in approach can change everything. Instead of criticizing, she chooses curiosity, and in doing so, she creates a space where real conversations can flourish. The power of curiosity in conversations. Curiosity is the secret to deeper understanding, emotional intimacy, and mutual respect. When a woman replaces criticism with genuine curiosity, she makes a man feel safe, valued, and heard. Instead of assuming the worst, she seeks to understand his thoughts, motivations, and emotions. Instead of accusing, she asks questions with an open heart. Instead of pointing out flaws, she explores his perspective. Let's look at some examples of how curiosity transforms communication. "You never listen to me. I feel like I'm not being heard. Is there something on your mind? You're so lazy. You never help around the house. I feel overwhelmed. Can we talk about how to balance things better? Why do you always act like that? I noticed you got quiet earlier. What's going on in your head?" Do you see the difference? The second approach invites a real conversation instead of shutting it down. It encourages openness rather than defensiveness. By leading with curiosity, a high-value woman creates a dynamic where men feel comfortable opening up instead of shutting down. How curiosity builds emotional safety. Men, just like women, crave emotional safety. They want to feel respected, accepted, and understood in their relationships. When a woman is quick to criticize, it creates an environment of stress and tension. A man may feel like he's constantly walking on eggshells, afraid to say or do the wrong thing. Over time, this erodes the relationship. However, when a woman approaches him with curiosity instead of judgment, it builds emotional safety. He knows that he can share his thoughts without being attacked. His perspective is valued, even if they don't always agree. His mistakes won't be used as weapons, but as opportunities for growth. This makes him feel more comfortable, more open, and more connected to her. Curiosity strengthens attraction. One of the reasons men feel deeply connected to high-value women is because of the way they make them feel. A woman who embraces curiosity makes a man feel understood. She seeks to know him deeply. Respected. She values his perspective. Safe. He can be himself around her. Excited. Conversations feel engaging and interesting. Compare this to a woman who constantly criticizes. Unappreciated. He feels like he's never enough. Defensive. He shuts down instead of opening up. Resentful. He starts to emotionally withdraw. Drained. Conversations feel exhausting instead of fulfilling. When a man feels uplifted in a woman's presence rather than drained, he naturally wants to be around her more. He enjoys talking to her, confiding in her, and sharing his thoughts because she makes it safe and rewarding. Practical ways to replace criticism with curiosity. Want to start incorporating this mindset into your conversations? Here are some practical shifts you can make. One of the most defining traits of a high-value woman is her ability to express her needs clearly without guilt, confusion, or resentment. Too many women struggle with communicating what they want in a way that is effective, direct, and respectful. Instead of stating their needs, they may drop hints, suppress their desires, or expect a man to just know what they need. When that doesn't happen, frustration builds, leading to resentment, passive aggressiveness, or emotional distance. But here's the truth. A high-value woman knows that her needs matter. She understands that a strong, lasting connection is built on open and honest communication, and she expresses herself in a way that encourages men to listen, respect, and respond positively. So let's break this down. Why expressing needs is essential in relationships. Every successful relationship, whether romantic, platonic, or professional, is built on clear communication. When a woman is upfront about what she needs, it creates emotional safety. The man knows where he stands and what is expected. Respect. She teaches others how to treat her by being clear about her boundaries. Deeper intimacy. Sharing needs strengthens emotional connection. Less conflict. Clarity prevents misunderstandings and unnecessary arguments. On the other hand, when a woman suppresses her needs or communicates them unclearly, it often leads to frustration. She feels unheard or unappreciated. Resentment. She starts feeling like she's giving more than she's receiving. Passive aggressiveness. Her needs come out in unhealthy ways. Emotional distance. Instead of resolving issues, she withdraws. A high-value woman avoids these pitfalls by communicating in a way that is direct, calm, and effective. The biggest mistakes women make when expressing their needs, many women struggle with expressing their needs because of fear of being too much. They worry that stating their needs will make them seem demanding, needy, or high maintenance. But the truth is, a man cannot meet a need he doesn't know exists. Expecting him to read her mind, she assumes that if he truly cares, he should just know what she wants. However, men and women think differently, and most men appreciate clear guidance over guessing games. Hinting instead of asking, instead of clearly saying what she needs, she drops hints and hopes he picks up on them. If he doesn't, she gets frustrated, even though she was never direct in the first place. Waiting until she's already angry instead of expressing her needs before a situation escalates She holds things in until she's frustrated, then lets it out in a way that feels like an attack. A high-value woman avoids these mistakes by choosing a healthy, direct, and respectful way to communicate. How a high-value woman expresses her needs clearly, the way a woman delivers her message is just as important as the message itself. A high-value woman communicates her needs in a way that is calm, confident, and constructive. Here's how she does it. 1, she uses I statements instead of you statements. Criticism and blame trigger defensiveness. Instead of saying, "You never make time for me," she frames it in a way that encourages discussion. "I feel disconnected when we don't spend time together. Can we plan a date night soon?" This approach takes ownership of her feelings while inviting collaboration instead of conflict. 2, she is direct and specific. Men respond better to clear, actionable communication. Vague complaints like, "I just feel off," don't give him a clear way to respond. Instead, she states exactly what she needs. "You never help around the house. I'd really appreciate it if you could handle the dishes tonight. It would take some stress off me." A specific request makes it easier for a man to understand and take action. 3, she doesn't assume. She asks instead of expecting him to already know what she wants. She asks for what she needs. "You should know why I'm upset. I feel hurt because I didn't get a response to my message earlier. Can we talk about that?" This approach removes assumptions and allows for an open discussion. At 4, she expresses appreciation, not just expectations. Men respond positively when they feel appreciated. Instead of only pointing out what's missing, a high-value woman acknowledges what's going well. It loves how thoughtful you are. "It means a lot when you plan things for us. I really appreciate you listening to me. It makes me feel so valued." This makes him more willing to meet her needs because he feels recognized for his efforts. 5, she maintains emotional control. A high-value woman doesn't let frustration dictate how she communicates. Instead of raising her voice or getting overly emotional, she stays calm, collected, and clear. If she feels overwhelmed, she takes a moment to breathe and center herself before addressing the situation. Examples of healthy versus unhealthy communication. Unhealthy: "You never make time for me. I'm always the last priority." Healthy: "I really miss spending time together. Can we plan something special this weekend?" Unhealthy: "Why do you always ignore my texts?" Healthy: "I feel a little disconnected when I don't hear from you. Can we find a way to check in more regularly?" Unhealthy: "You're so selfish. You never think about what I need." Healthy: "I feel unsupported when I handle everything alone. Can we talk about sharing responsibilities?" See the difference? The second approach invites collaboration, while the first one creates defensiveness. Why men love women who express their needs clearly. Men deeply appreciate women who communicate in a way that is direct but loving. Here's why. We live in a world that often confuses kindness with compliance, especially when it comes to women. From the time we're young, many of us are taught to be nice, to avoid making others uncomfortable, to smooth things over, to not be difficult. We're told that to be good is to be agreeable. But here's the truth that high-value women come to understand. Being agreeable is not the same as being kind. And setting boundaries is not the same as being mean. High-value women learn that boundaries are not about controlling other people. They're about protecting your peace. They're not built out of anger. They're built out of clarity. And clarity is one of the most loving things we can offer, both to ourselves and to others. When a high-value woman says, "I'm not available for that kind of conversation," or I don't allow people to speak to me that way. She's not being dramatic. She's not being cold. She's not overreacting. She is saying, this is the standard I hold for how I will be treated by others and by myself. There comes a moment in every high-value woman's life when she stops performing. She stops twisting herself into a shape that pleases others. She stops second-guessing her voice, softening her truth, or diluting her strength in the hope of keeping the peace. She doesn't hustle for her worth anymore. She knows that if love or respect has to be earned through performance, it's not real. It's conditional. And conditional love is not love at all. It's control wearing a mask. The toxic people thrive on power dynamics. They love when you need their validation, because then they get to decide when you're enough. They give just enough approval to keep you hungry, but never enough to let you rest. It's like a treadmill with no off switch. The faster you run, the more they move the finish line. But high-value women don't run that race anymore. They've learned that approval is a currency they don't need to spend their soul to earn. They are done tap dancing for people who criticize their steps but have never had the courage to dance themselves. This doesn't mean they don't care about connection. Far from it. They care deeply. But they don't confuse connection with contortion. They no longer shrink to make others feel big. They don't let the fear of disapproval silence them, and they don't let someone else's discomfort dictate their truth. When someone says, "You've changed," a high-value woman doesn't rush to defend herself. She pauses, she reflects, and sometimes she says, "Yes, I have changed. I grew." And then she lets that be enough. This strain doesn't come from arrogance. It comes from having walked through the fire of self-doubt, people-pleasing, and approval-seeking. It comes from the deep, sometimes painful, process of unlearning the idea that being liked is the same as being safe, because it's not. High-value women know that when you constantly try to be liked by everyone, you eventually lose the parts of yourself worth loving in the first place. So they stop performing, they stop proving, they stop over-explaining their no and apologizing for their yes. They show up as they are, unpolished, unapologetic, whole, and trust that the right people won't be repelled by their power, they'll be drawn to it. Because here's what they know. You don't have to dance to be worthy, you already are. Toxic people are skilled at emotional alchemy. They know how to turn their own chaos into your responsibility, their insecurity into your fault. They project, they provoke, and they push buttons just to see what spills out of you. But a high-value woman, she doesn't absorb the poison. She may feel it, she may even flinch when it hits, but she doesn't swallow it whole. She doesn't internalize the lies people throw at her because she's done the work of learning the truth about herself. Here's what sets her apart. She's not reactive, she's responsive. There's a big difference. Toxic people want you to react. They feed on your explosions, your breakdowns, your defensiveness, because it gives them a sense of power. They love to poke the wound, then step back and say, "See, you're the problem." But a high-value woman has learned that she can feel her feelings without letting them take the wheel. She has cultivated a sacred pause between what someone says and what she chooses to do with it. And in that pause, she breathes. She reminds herself, this isn't mine. She chooses not to ingest the insult, the guilt trip, the manipulation, because she knows you don't have to drink every cup of poison that's handed to you. This kind of restraint isn't weakness, it's power. Quiet, grounded power. Now let's be clear. Not absorbing the poison doesn't mean tolerating it. High-value women are not doormats, but they don't allow the toxic words or actions of others to become the voice in their own head. They know the difference between what's about them and what's about the other person. That's emotional intelligence, that's maturity, that's freedom. It's the ability to look at someone's cruelty and say, I see your pain, but I will not become a mirror for it. I hear your criticism, but I'm not available for emotional warfare. I witness your storm, but I will not drown in it with you. This doesn't mean she's perfect. She still gets angry. She still hurts. But instead of throwing the poison back, she processes it. She journals. She breathes. She prays. She goes to therapy. She uses the pain as data, not identity. And perhaps most importantly, she protects her peace not out of fear, but out of reverence. She knows what it costs her to let someone else's dysfunction become her emotional landscape. So she chooses something different. She chooses to stay anchored when others try to pull her into the undertow. Because a high-value woman knows. You can't control how someone treats you, but you can always choose whether to make their poison your truth. High-value women love deeply. They're empathetic, intuitive, generous with their energy. They see the good in people even when it's buried under layers of pain and dysfunction. But here's the key difference. They've learned how to love without losing themselves. There was likely a time before the healing, before the growth, when she mistook compassion for responsibility. She believed that if someone was broken, it was her job to stay and help them fix it. If someone was emotionally unavailable, it was her job to crack them open. If someone lashed out, her instinct was to comfort, not confront, because she saw their wounds and she didn't want them to hurt. That's not compassion. That's codependency wearing kindness like a mask. A high-value woman has done the sacred, gritty, internal work of untangling that lie. She's learned that compassion says, I see your pain, but codependency says, your pain is my fault and I must save you. And those are not the same thing. She understands that toxic people often weaponize empathy. They lean on phrases like, I didn't mean to, or you're the only one who understands me, or you're abandoning me. They blur the lines between love and obligation, between help and self-erasure. And for someone with a big heart, it's easy to get pulled in. But now she's wise enough to recognize emotional manipulation when it shows up, even when it's wrapped in a victim story. She can hold space without being the space. And she can say, I care about what you're going through, but I'm not here to carry you. I can love you and still say no. I understand why you hurt, but I will not allow that hurt to spill into my life like poison. This kind of compassion is strong, boundaried, discerning. It's not cold, it's mature. It doesn't seek control, it honors dignity. She knows that real compassion never requires self-abandonment. It doesn't mean tolerating abuse. It doesn't mean fixing adults who refuse to grow. It doesn't mean sacrificing your joy for someone else's comfort. Because here's the truth. You can sit beside someone in their suffering without diving headfirst into the pit with them. You can offer kindness without offering your sanity. You can be soft-hearted and still irons bind. High-value women no longer confuse enmeshment with intimacy. They no longer confuse helping with healing. They no longer confuse staying with saving. They offer love, but not at the cost of their mental, emotional, or spiritual health, because they understand that real compassion has boundaries. And any love that requires you to betray yourself isn't love. It's bondage. There's a quiet power in walking away without slamming the door. High-value women don't make grand exits to prove a point. They don't leave relationships or toxic dynamics with fireworks and final words meant to burn the bridge, because their departure isn't a performance. It's a decision rooted in dignity, and dignity doesn't need to yell to be heard. You see, toxic people often feed on chaos. They stir the pot, provoke reactions, and thrive on emotional messiness, especially when they sense someone slipping from their grip. They bait you with guilt, draw you in with drama, and hope you'll break character just enough to validate their narrative that you're the unstable one, that you're the problem. But a high-value woman doesn't take the bait. She's learned that peace isn't passive, it's a choice, a practiced one, a powerful one. It's choosing stillness over retaliation, silence over shouting, clarity over chaos. She doesn't leave to hurt them, she leaves to heal herself. And the moment she realizes that staying is costing her more than leaving ever will, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, she begins her exit. It might not be immediate. She might try in her grace to repair, to reconcile, to hold one last space for growth. But if the toxicity persists, if her boundaries are mocked, her voice dismissed, or her soul stifled, she no longer clings to potential. She honors patterns over promises. And when the pattern is clear, she moves. But here's what she doesn't do. She doesn't ghost to avoid accountability. She doesn't leave a wreckage of insults behind her. She doesn't make her departure a spectacle. She just lets go, sometimes with a conversation, sometimes with a quiet fade, always with intention. And the world may not understand. Toxic people certainly won't. They'll say, she changed, became distant, wasn't who she used to be, but she knows the truth. She didn't walk away because she stopped caring. She walked away because she started caring about herself. Leaving with grace doesn't mean she wasn't deeply affected. Often she cries in the shower. She rewrites the story in her head at 2 a.m. She second guesses, mourns, and grieves what might have been. Because endings, even necessary ones, hurt. But she no longer equates loyalty with self-sacrifice. She can love someone and still recognize they are not healthy for her. She can hold compassion and still create distance. She can exit without venom because she's not interested in revenge. She's interested in restoration of her peace, her power, her wholeness. No, she doesn't need to burn the bridge. She just no longer needs to walk across it because she's building something better. And that begins with walking away from what no longer honors who she's becoming. In a world that's constantly shouting at women, telling them who to be, how to behave, what to tolerate, and when to speak, it's easy to lose your footing. It's easy to start questioning your instincts. Easy to wonder, am I too much? Am I not enough? Did I make this up? Am I the problem? Toxic people know this, and they use it. They gaslight. They spin narratives. They deny your reality, twist your words, and weaponize your empathy. They'll say you're being sensitive when you're setting a boundary, or you're imagining things when your intuition is spot on. But here's the thing, a high-value woman no longer mistakes manipulation for truth. She no longer lets the noise drown out her knowing, because she's done the work. Not just surface-level affirmations, but deep, soul-level excavation. She's sat with herself long enough to understand what she believes, what she values, what she deserves. She's listened to the whispers of her gut, the pull of her heart, the quiet wisdom that says, you are not crazy, you are waking up. And now she anchors herself in that truth, no matter how loud the world gets. When toxic people try to gaslight her, she doesn't spin, she gets still. She grounds herself in evidence, in memory, in pattern. She doesn't debate with delusion, she stands in clarity. Because truth doesn't shout. It doesn't beg to be believed. Truth is quiet, it's consistent, it holds. I value women no longer allow themselves to be defined by someone else's projections. They don't internalize blame that doesn't belong to them. They don't absorb character assassinations disguised as constructive feedback. They know your truth is not a group project. You don't need consensus to claim it. This doesn't make them rigid, it makes them rooted. Rooted in self-awareness, rooted in integrity, rooted in lived experience, not external opinion. And here's what's powerful. Because they are anchored in truth, they're not easily swayed by noise, not even the internal noise, not the fear that says you're going to regret this, not the guilt that whispers you should have tried harder, not the shame that sneaks in and says maybe this is all your fault. A high-value woman doesn't pretend those voices don't exist. She just refuses to give them the mic. Instead, she tunes in to the deeper voice, the wiser one that says, you saw what you saw. You know what you know. You did what you had to do. That voice becomes her anchor because the storm will always come in the form of criticism, manipulation, or even self-doubt. But when you're anchored in truth, the storm doesn't move you. It might rattle the sails, it might shake the boat, but it doesn't sink you. You stay standing. So the high-value woman no longer fights to be heard by those committed to misunderstanding her. She doesn't explain herself into exhaustion. She doesn't chase after clarity from people who benefit from her confusion. She simply stands anchored, rooted, steady, because in a world full of noise, knowing your truth is your power. And living it unapologetically, wholeheartedly, is your revolution. High-value women don't handle toxic people with rage. They don't need to scream to be heard. They don't need to retaliate to reclaim their power because they've already done the deeper work, the kind that doesn't show up on the surface, but anchors everything beneath it. They have learned to protect their peace without becoming bitter, to hold compassion without carrying someone else's chaos, to walk away without needing to burn things down behind them. They don't perform for validation. They don't explain their boundaries like apologies. They don't dance for love because they are love. And when toxicity comes, as it inevitably does, they meet it not with war, but with wisdom. They choose to protect their energy like it's sacred because it is. They choose truth over noise, grace over drama, strength over reaction. They choose themselves, not as a last resort, but as a first principle. Because a high-value woman knows you don't rise by tearing others down. You rise by refusing to be pulled under. You rise by standing in your worth quietly, boldly, fully. This isn't about being better than anyone. It's about being better to yourself. So to every woman listening, you don't have to earn your worth. You don't have to stay where you're shrinking. You don't have to explain your peace to those committed to chaos. Just be still, be clear, be rooted. And remember, you don't need to fight every battle. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away standing tall, with your head high, your heart intact, and your truth held quietly, fiercely, and fully in your own hands. That is how high-value women handle toxic people, with grace, with truth, and with unwavering self-respect.